pick up on the situation in the Middle East because Israel's President Isaac Herzog has described South Africa's genocidal intent case at the International Court of Justice as atrocious and preposterous. The accusation relates to Tel Aviv's military offensive in Gaza, which has killed over 23,000 Palestinians. It follows a surprise attack by the Palestinian armed group Hamas in the south of Israel at the beginning of October last year. That attack killed over 1,000 people. More than 200 others were taken captive. Herzog has accused South Africa of hypocrisy for taking the case to the ICJ. Now, he was speaking during a visit by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's in Tel Aviv.
The Convention Against Genocide was enacted by the international community following the worst atrocities of humankind, the Shoah, the Holocaust, which was aimed specifically against the Jews, the Jewish people, in order to eliminate the Jewish race, the Jewish people. In Hamas's charter, it's almost identical in many, many ways. And here, with the hypocrisy of South Africa, we will be there at the International Court of Justice and will present proudly our case of using self-defense under our most inherent right under international humanitarian law, where we are doing our utmost under extremely complicated circumstances on the ground to make sure that there will be no unintended consequences and no civilian casualties.
Here at home, legal expert Thamsanqa Malusi says that South Africa has a high prospect of success at the International Court of Justice, but has warned that political factors could sway the matter in Israel's favor.
I don't think it's an open and shut case. International law is, there are also other political factors at play. It's not, it's not just merely a legal issue. That being said, on the legal front, I think South Africa makes a really compelling case, and I think there are really high prospects of success, specifically on the provisional measures. So I think if you purely go judging it on a legal basis, I think on my assessment, I think there are high probabilities that they would be successful, but there may well be other factors at play which have nothing to do with the actual legal nature of the case.
Well, as we said earlier, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel tonight. It's one of the stops that he's made during his latest tour of the Middle East. He's been to the region at least 4 times since war broke out in October. He's already been to Turkey. He's also been to Doha in Qatar in the last few days. Let's talk about this now with Na'eem Jeenah, who is a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. A very good evening to you, Na'eem. Good to have you back on News at Prime. So I've just been looking at a readout, in fact, from the State Department in America, and they say that during this trip, Blinken has stressed the importance of avoiding further civilian harm and protecting civilian infrastructure in Gaza. And you have to wonder, when much of Gaza has been destroyed and more than 23,000 people killed, if that call has not come too late.
Well, it's not too late because he and Joe Biden have been making the same call for now, almost 10 weeks or so, except that they make that kind of a call to the Israelis, but then continue increasing their supply of weapons to the Israelis to continue doing what they're doing and to continue the genocide. So one wonders where the hypocrisy really is. I mean, you can't say there shouldn't be civilian casualties and then you give weapons in order to create more civilian casualties. This is the situation that the United States is in.
Is it hypocrisy or that the United States has basically lost its influence over Israel, because not just on the issue of better protection of civilians among Palestinians in Gaza, but also even when Biden started speaking about a need to go back to the conversation of creating a state for Palestinians where they can govern themselves, Tel Aviv shot that down almost instantly.
So the issue is not that the U.S. doesn't have any leverage over Israel. It's that the U.S. Has chosen not to use its leverage. I mean, if the U.S. stopped supplying weapons to Israel, this war would really come to an end very quickly, or the onslaught on Gaza would come to an end much more quickly than if they continue as they are. If the U.S. stops its billions of dollars of military aid to Israel, it'll stop. I mean, this has been done before, not on such a huge issue as this, but President George Bush, the first George Bush, for example, threatened to stop military aid to Israel unless they stopped building settlements at that time. And he was serious, and they stopped. An American president is able to do that. But the White House currently has decided that it will not, that it will say these things, but it will not exercise the leverage that it actually does possess over Israel, but would, act as if it's weak in the face of Israel. In fact, the two strong parties here, the global superpower, the United States, and on the other side, the power with nuclear weapons that is bombing Gaza, both play as if they are victims in this instance. The U.S. pretends like it has no leverage over Israel. Israel pretends like it's a victim, accusing South Africa of blood libel, hypocrisy, and all kinds of nonsense. When in fact they are the strong parties here, and they are the ones who can make this stop. When Herzog said in your piece earlier on that there will be no unintended consequences in Gaza, I believe him. So the killing of 120 journalists in Gaza is not an unintended consequence. It's a targeted assassination. The bombing of hospitals are not unintended consequences. These are targeted attacks. Hospitals, schools, churches, mosques, journalists, doctors, etc. Israel is specifically targeting all of these people, and all of these are, of course, war crimes.
And what then do you think is behind the way America is moving on this issue? Is it still down to what they said at the beginning of the war in October, where they said Israel not only had a duty but had a responsibility to go after Hamas in Gaza because Hamas killed those more than 1,000 people in the south of Israel on October 7th? Is that what it's about, or is there more to it?
Even if they believed that on the 7th or on the 8th of October, within 2 weeks thereafter, they would have seen what was happening. Within 2 months thereafter, Israel had murdered more children in Gaza than had been murdered in wars all over the world in the past year. That's not a kind of an excuse. And to say that Israel has the right to defend itself when the whole world is clearly seeing that what they are doing is not degrading Hamas capacity. That's not what they have succeeded in doing. In fact, they've met no military objective whatsoever in Gaza. What they've been doing is murdering civilians. So what is the reason that the United States is allowing this to go on is your question. And it is, I think, that Joe Biden, number one, went into the White House feeling that though he was as strong a Zionist as he himself says he is, that his relationship with the Prime Minister of Israel was a very weak one. And so he needed to bend over backwards to strengthen that relationship and to make himself look good to the Israelis and the pro-Israeli lobby in the U.S. And I think that this is all it is. I mean, he is acting as if he has no backbone, when in fact he has all of the leverage, a global superpower that is supplying the weapons, that's supplying the munitions, the rockets, the 2,000-pound bombs that are being dropped on hospitals and civilians in Gaza are supplied by the United States. If they stop supplying those won't be dropped.
And there is the South African action at the International Court of Justice that is going to pursue action against Israel for what South Africa's government has said are genocidal crimes being committed against Palestinian civilians in Gaza. When you talk about a country like America, the United States, some have said it's been complicit in some of the alleged war crimes. Is there room, possibility, a prospect for justice to be sought or accountability to be sought from the United States for its alleged complicity, if you will, in what we're seeing happen?
Well, the first stage would be, of course, to prosecute this matter at the ICJ, as is happening later this week. Once we get a judgment from the ICJ, even with just provisional measures, then we will have to wait to see for the final judgment around it. The provisional measures would essentially rule that Israel should stop its onslaught on Gaza. The final ruling about genocide, the merits of the case, that could take many, many months, or perhaps even a year or so. Once that happens, and there's a ruling that what Israel has done in Gaza is genocide, then yes, it would be possible to then pursue those who enabled and were complicit in that genocide, and in that case, certainly the United States and various of its politicians.
Mm. And where are the Arab states in all of this? I mean, during his visit now, Blinken has made stops in countries such as Qatar, for example, which we know has played a strong role in mediating around, especially the release of the captives who are being held in Gaza and who are being held in Gaza, and Palestinians who are held by their thousands as well in Israeli jails. Now, the Arab states, we're hearing from the U.S. State Department, for example, have said that they would want closer relations with Israel, but only if there is a practical pathway to a Palestinian state. Is that possible?
Well, for one thing, I think the most of the Arab states, not all, but most of the Arab states have sold out the Palestinians. You have half a dozen or more that have already normalized relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia, before the 6th of October, was getting ready to do so, and now, those plans have been spoiled, despite the fact that there is no Palestinian state and there is no pathway to a Palestinian state. But your question whether such a pathway is possible, at the moment, under the kind of, let's say, accepted model of a two-state solution, it's not possible for a couple of reasons. One is that a two-state solution, as it is being envisaged, or it's no longer being envisaged, but as it was previously envisaged by Israel, was not one where there would be a sovereign, viable Palestinian state. It was one where there would be a Palestinian Bantustan. Israel is no longer even considering a Bantustan. It only wishes to have a situation where it is in full control of the entire territory from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, and controls various parts of that territory in different ways. Military occupation in the West Bank, siege in Gaza, etc. And also that as things stand now, with the control that Israel has over the occupied Palestinian territories, with the settlements that it has built, etc., there's no real possibility of a two-state solution that is workable. And so, really the only option is a situation where you have ultimately a democratic state between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, where all those who live in that state have equal rights and the same rights as each other. I mean, this really seems like the only possible just solution. Israel is not interested, of course, in any just solution. It is very happy to maintain its occupation, to continue with its colonization of Palestinian territory, and to maintain its apartheid practices, both in the occupied territories as well as within Israel against the Palestinian population.
Na'eem Jeenah, good to speak to you. Na'eem is a senior researcher with the Mabungubwe Institute.